So now let us see that the tissues of plants and animals. We discussed that tissue is a group of cells which are similar in function and structure. So tissues are found in both plants as well as in animals. So the multicellular animals, they consist of different organ systems made up of organs. Organs are made up of tissues. So tissues are found both in plants as well as animals. But are they same? Do plants and animals have same kind of tissues? No. There are different kind of tissues. Now let us see the differences between plants and animals on certain points. Now we are going to discuss the differences between plant tissues and animal tissues. Basically the plants and animals, and what are the various criteria. So on basing these criteria, the plants and animals have different tissues. So these points explain why the plants and animals have different tissues, why they are not having same kind of tissue. What are these points? The first thing is movement. Movement. If you see that there, in case of movement, plants are fixed. Majority of the plants are fixed. Of course, certain plants, they float on water, but plants are sedentary. They fix in the soil. Plant cannot move from one place to another place. And plants do not possess any kind of voluntary movement, like it cannot show movements like your muscular movements. Plants, they have some movements called as the tropic movements, that which they show movement towards some kind of trophism, some kind of stimulus, either water or earth or sunlight. So these kind of movements are shown by the plant parts. Plant stem bends towards the light, plant roots move towards the water or ground. So these kind of movements are seen in plants. So very little movements are seen. And even though the movements are there in plants, very slow movement. Slow movement. Slow movements. So what kind of tissues are found in the plants? Plants do not require the tissues as like in animals for quick movement. The main thing the plants need is strength. So most of the plant tissues, they provide support and strength to them. That means they have to stand stable against the wind, against the rain, because they don't have any shelter like animals. They cannot go for a shelter when there is a very heavy storm. So they should withstand on their own. So their bodies must have strength. So their tissues are in such a way that provide a lot of mechanical strength to the plant. In case of animal tissues, what do you find? What kind of tissues are required? So they are the tissues that should help the animals in movement, quick movement. So quick movement, such kind of tissues are required there. In case of animals, animals also, they need strength. They need support. So there are some tissues which provide shape, strength and support to the animals. At the same time, there are tissues that help the organisms to move. And the animals, they show various kinds of movements, variety of movements. So for that, they need different kind of tissues. So if you compare that there, the number of tissues a animal required is more than the plant tissues. Because you know the functionalities of animals are more, the activities of animals are more, the abilities of animals are more. So obviously they require more number of tissues. So they have more number of tissues compared to the plant tissues. And second difference is growth pattern. Growth pattern. Plants and animals differ in their growth patterns. How they differ in their growth patterns? So plants, they have growth in specific tissues, specific parts. Growth is found only in the specific parts of a plant. The whole plant is not uniformly grown up. So the growth is focused to certain parts of the plant. Whereas in case of animals, the growth is uniform. The growth is uniform. The growth is uniform throughout the body. All the parts are uniformly growing up, and the growth is limited at certain point. So that kind of differences we find between this plant and animals, so which affect their tissues. The next one is organ complexity, is the other factor, other criteria which decides the tissues of plants and animals. Organ complexity. If you compare the organ complexity, the plants they have less organ complexity. The animals they have more complexity of organs. More complexity of organs. So the organ complexity is less in plants, because you see in case of an animal, if you dissect an animal, a rat or any other animal, you see different kind of parts. If you notice, if you label the internal body parts of an vertebrate, you find different kind of organs. Heart you find, lungs you find, stomach you find, intestines, kidneys, spinal cord. So many organs are found. But whereas if you dissect a plant, if you cut a plant, what do you see in that? You will not find much difference. Means you will not find so many organ systems. So the complexity is less in plants compared to animals. In animals, the organ complexity is very high. So that is one of the factor on basing which the animals they have more number of tissues compared to the plant tissues. Even the tissues are entirely different in their structure and function. The other thing is cell growth, growth of cells. So the growth of cells is also varied. Here the growth of cells in plants is all, as I told, it is localized to certain parts. Growing cells are called as meristematic cells. Meristematic cells, and other cells are called as permanent tissue. So on the basis of the division of cells, they are categorized into meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. But the growth pattern in animals is different. So these are the reasons why plants and animals they have different kinds of tissues. So what are the reasons? Here plants they need strength, so they need some tissues which provide them high strength. They do not require the tissues which provide flexible movements, because movement is not a characteristic of the plant. Of course, even though they possess little movements, in case of animals they require the tissues which help the animals in quick movements, large number of movements, that is the movements inside the body, movement within the body, movement from one place to another place, that is the locomotion. For all these movements they require the tissues. So growth pattern, organ complexity and cell growth, all these are the differences between a plant and an animal, which decides the kind and number of tissues they have. Now let us begin with the plant tissues. First discuss about the plant tissues and what are the different kind of plant tissues and what are their structure and function and how they are organized in the body of a plant. So let us talk about the plant tissues at first. Let us see the basic division or categorization or classification of plant tissues. So already I told you the point that plant tissues are divided primarily based upon the growth pattern. The growth pattern. So plants do not grow evenly. There are specific regions of growth in plant. So the cells or the tissues that are actively growing are called meristematic tissues. Meristematic tissue. And the tissue which is not growing is called permanent tissue. Permanent tissue. So this permanent tissue is again divided into simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue. So these are the basic classification of plant tissues. So again this meristematic tissue is divided into three, that is apical meristem, apical meristematic tissue, lateral meristematic tissue and intercalary meristematic tissue. So this is the way how the classification of the plant tissues is done primarily. Now let us talk about the meristematic tissue, then we'll go to the permanent tissue. In that we'll learn about simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue.